Unspoken Issues.
So we're heading on to our next, as we're counting them down right here on the countdown. Our average on this one was a total of 4. You had this as your least favorite. My goodness. Spawn number 1. I have listed as number 2. So when we add those two together and average it out, it's going to make the middle of the road here. Spawn number 1 comes in at our, I guess, 4th book on this list. Let's go ahead and talk about, we sort of already did. Like, I talked about when I first saw Spawn number 1. You mentioned about how it was a hot book. It was really popular and it sold a ton of copies. I thought it was like one of the rarest comics ever.
Right.
I was under a complete misconception, a complete misunderstanding that this thing was pretty easy to find. I don't know how, because I looked for it everywhere in my LCSs and I never saw it. Of course, I came in later.
I think that was just people were hoarding them in the early.
You're absolutely right. That's gotta be.
They people would buy 2 or 3 copies, buy one to read, one to put away, one to put in the backboard, one for the kids. And then a lot of comic shops are probably doing the same thing. They would probably had, a case of them and they would sell half and then keep half and then try and sell them for $25-$30 a month later or whatever.
Right. Why don't you do our listeners a favor real quick and just kind of tell them who Spawn is?
Spawn in his previous life was Al Simmons, a government soldier, I guess sort of like a CIA operative type, who was killed in the line of duty, goes to hell or a hell, makes a deal with a demon to come back to Earth because he wants to see his wife again. And when he's sent back, doesn't really have his memory, and he's sent back as Spawn, who is a character with hellish powers. He's got I hate to even use this comparison because I don't think it's really accurate to his origins, but a lot of people would say he's like a cross between, visually, between Spider-Man, Ghost Rider, and Batman.
Okay.
He's got a big flowing cape. He's got the chains like Ghost Rider. And he's got the crescent moon style eyes on each side, kind of like Spider-Man.
Mm-hmm.
The red and black motif for the rest of the costume.
Oh, well, that's, you know what? That's going to sell books. At least for Jesse Starcher. Someone get Blood Axe on the
design. And I say that's not really fair because McFarlane designed Spawn, I think, 10 or 15 years before this comic was ever released or whatever. So, I mean, Ghost Rider existed, but I don't think the previous Ghost Rider had chains.
Right.
I don't know that the black costume Spider-Man had ever existed up to that point. And he's got more of a Dracula cape than a Batman cape.
My gosh.
I'd never realized this is a painted cover. It's McFarlane's pencils, and then Ken Stacy is credited as the painter, like painted over the pencils, which kind of makes sense now that I'm looking at it, now that I know that. But I never knew that until today when I was reading the back matter for this issue.
Well, this issue hits the shelves June 3rd of 1992. Title of the story is called Questions. Writer and artist Todd McFarlane. Lettered by Tom Orzechowski. Colored by Steve Oliff of Oleoptics, which I don't know if Oleoptics is a thing at this point. Is that credited anywhere in here? No, it doesn't say it. No. It's not. Okay, well, Steve Oliff of Oleoptics or whatever it is. So here we go. The news is covering Lieutenant Colonel Al Simmons' death back in 1987. That's how we open this book. It's like the news talking about how Al Simmons died and what the circumstances were. There's mention of Al leaving behind a wife who apparently has been seen with a high school friend by the name of Martin Alexander at the funeral. So then we kind of get into the character we've all come to see, and that's Spawn, who's reflecting on the things that's happened in his afterlife, I guess you'd say. In his afterlife, where he's starting to realize he can't remember everything, but he knows he made a deal to come back because of the woman he loved, but he doesn't remember all of the details. Not even the woman he loved's name. He can't remember her name. He remembers he was framed as well, so that's one thing that kind of sticks out to him. Now, out in the city, Spawn stops at attempted rape, and memories begin to flood back into his head. Spawn is trying to recall who he is. Taking the mask and gloves off, he realizes just how grotesque he's become. And when you take the mask, what's it look like underneath there, Chris?
Looks like a charred human remains, basically.
Right. Pretty scary looking dude. Now we switch over to Sam and Twitch. who are on the case of a mobster whose heart was, I guess, pulled out and stuffed in his mouth and thrown out of a 44th floor window. 44th floor window. But they aren't too upset over the work this person has apparently been saving them as well. So they're okay. As long as, I guess, some bad guys are eating some dust, it's fine with them. Now, somewhere in time, a demonic figure promises Simmons' troubles have just begun. I can't believe this is the synopsis I wrote because it's really short. But yeah, I mean, Spawn starts to recall who he is after saving this lady, has kind of like a bit of a breakdown. Sam and Twitch are out doing their thing. And then we finally get this kind of like epilogue where this, like I said, the demonic figure is like, oh, Simmons, if you think you've got it bad now, just wait. You had this at number 6, and I think you owe the people an explanation.
I mean, I've just never really been we talked about it when we did Devil Day. I've never really been a big Spawn guy. I kind of like Spawn. I think he looks cool. I like McFarlane's art a lot. Yeah. He only did like the first 15 issues maybe or so. And then Capullo took over, and he's never really done anything. McFarlane's never really done any interior art since then, as far as pencils anyway. I just, I like Ghost Rider and the Midnight Sun stuff. I like a lot of the supernatural, superheroic stuff a lot of times, but Spawn has just never been a big deal to me. He's just kind of like, yeah, he's all right. The movie's terrible. The animated series, I would kind of like to watch. It's on HBO Max, and I probably will watch it at some point because I think it probably is good. But again, I like all these comics. This just happens to be the one I like the least.
Okay. All right. There's a bit of a mention here of, or at least a kind of a reference to the Spawn power meter, which it all starts out at 9999. And then you do see, which, hey, look at me, I'm paying attention. He uses some of his power, and now he's down to 9995. So you really don't get a whole lot in this. You got to, again, it's first issue. We're going to get introduced to our main character, the problems this guy is having, the ancillary characters, Sam and Twitch, who are going to be recurring here throughout this series.
Yeah, I did not realize they showed up in issue 1. For whatever reason, I thought they came along later. Like maybe, if you had asked me a week ago, when did Sam and Twitch first appear? I would be like, maybe the issue with the child murderer, whatever issue that is, which is I think issue 4 or 5. Mm-hmm. But I haven't read these in forever. But I remember Sam and Twitch becoming a bigger deal like when they had their own series, like in the late 90s. But yeah, I was surprised when I read this again, like, oh, they were here from the very beginning.
You talk about a unique looking book.
That's what this really is just kind of like McFarlane is just kind of going nuts, and he can do whatever he wants. He kind of had that freedom on Spider-Man a little bit, I guess, but this is just him kind of really going crazy in a lot of this outside of the pages with just the newscasters or whatever. Why is a government soldier on the 10 sexiest men alive list? How does that happen?
I'm sitting there I'm reading that, and this is one of my criticisms of the Spawn book. Okay, let's see. Our first page, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 small text boxes. Okay, so we get some, it's Spawn, suffering. Why am I like this? Okay, real simple stuff. Great. And then all of a sudden we decide, oh, hey, we're going to sit out and we're going to type for about an hour and make everybody read it. And it just switches you into this mode of like, okay, and kind of gives you a little bit about Wanda. It kind of gives you a little bit about Simmons. It's the best way to kind of, what do they call this?
Info dump, sort of.
Yeah. There you go. It is an info dump. It's exposition. It's a way of inundating the reader with as much information as they have. CNN covering it. Okay, I can believe that. And then we have an opinion piece by Mr. Beardo here. Okay, that's fine. But then we have Channel 7, which is like fashion news. It's like ETV or something. I'm like, why are you even that seemed kind of like out of character. Like they're talking about this guy's widow. He's talking about this guy's widow and how she's hanging out with a high school friend. Why does that matter?
It's almost like Simmons and Wanda were Kanye and Kim Kardashian or something.
Right, they're out there, and that doesn't happen. I don't recall that being part of the Spawn mythos at all. But yeah, that's right. It's like, how are these guys so popular that they're making the news and people are talking about fashion and covering the funeral of all things, on a fashion channel. Lovely Wanda Blake was absolutely divine and disarmingly simple jet black Giovanni original. Yeah, she's going to wear black. Gosh. Anyway, I can remember that happens so much in Spawn, so much that it drove me nuts. I wanted more action. We're gonna have to pick panel/page, and there's a lot to pick from. For this first issue. My gosh.
The second page, there's this 6-panel grid of, the chapel or whatever, or the steeple, whatever. The lightning in the background, and then Spawn shows up. You see basically just a silhouette of him, and then you see the green eyes, like really cool, like 6-panel grid there.
Yeah, right.
And then, the page after the newscasters or whatever, this is a 9-panel grid for the whole page. And it's giving you kind of like flashes of his old life. And you'll see the panel on the far left, the bottom, where it says "He turned on me," and you see the skull. So, like, I'm assuming that's like a hint that this is going to be Chapel.
Right.
Which, you don't know that ahead of time. You probably just think the skull is Simmons.
Right.
But, what likely is being implied here is that he's looking at Chapel as he's being or whatever.
That's his.
Because we find out later, Chapel's the one who kills him or whatever. Spoiler! 30-year-old spoiler for a 30-year-old.
I love it, man. That was a big deal for me. It was a big deal.
Big reveal.
How do you not go like on a Dark Knight Returns with the lightning? And then even looking at the 9-panel grid, if you look at some of that as the story flows, I get a very weird sense of Dark Knight Returns. So it's, you can tell where his influence lies. And at some point don't we get a Frank Miller Batman Spawn? Yeah,
that comes a few years later. Yeah.
And I hear that that's like the worst.
It is not well regarded.
Okay. All right.
I've read it. It's been probably 10 or 12 years ago, and it was art. I mean, it's not great, but it's not as bad as I think people make it out to be. The art is cool. I mean, if nothing else, McFarlane does a good job with the art.
Okay. Let me justify my number 2 ranking for this. And I'll just say this. McFarlane was one of the most dynamic artists that Marvel had at one point. He created a character that goes on to this day. That probably supports or at least lifts him up in my rankings because of just the importance of the character. But the look of this book is so unique. I mean, if you compare it to Cyberforce has got some dynamics going on there. Shadowhawk pales in comparison to what we have happening. There's not really a whole lot of action here. You have really just a story happening, some really cool poses. He gets in the fight with some muggers in the alleyway, but it's not like he is using anything. I don't think he's using his powers other than he does that one little spark.
Right.
He hits that one guy in the eye and brings his little power meter down to -5 or -5 or whatever he does. There is plenty more of this to come. As these issues get going, the battles are going to get more crazy. So it's a nice kind of it's a nice taste. But when you look at the visuals of just some of the stuff it's not action packed, it's a horror book.
Yeah.
It really is.
I think you're kind of reminding me why I wasn't a big Spawn guy at the time, because I was all about like comics with a lot of action. And I remember now that you're saying this, Spawn number 2, the Violator shows up, and I'm like, oh, he's going to be his villain. And then Spawn 3, I believe, is when the Violator and Spawn have their fight, and it's like the fight is nothing, basically. If I remember right, Violator rips his heart out, and then maybe there's like a dream sequence or something, and then Spawn comes back and he's got like a hole in his chest, and then that's it. Then the fight continues in the next issue. I was always let down, it seemed like, and I was just like, where's this going? It seemed like whenever I would read an issue of Spawn, like it just always seemed like not a whole lot happened. It's just there's a lot of cool images, but not a whole lot's happening. There's not really much action. I just was never like really that into it.
Didn't we talk Angela, the first appearance of Angela on here?
That's true. We did do that.
That's what we did. Okay. That's right. Okay. I mean, we do get to see a moment of weakness. Hey, Evan Bevins, by the way, we'll go ahead and shout him out. He did a whole blog on this issue in conjunction with Superblog Team Up. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you don't want to take our word for it, feel free to go over there and check out Evan Bevins and what he had to say about this specific issue. But as for it's beautiful. It is a very Todd McFarlane book. It's got all the signature stuff you are expecting from Spawn. I mean, I don't know what you're expecting from Spawn, but when you look at that cover, there's some crazy stuff that's probably going to be going on. And just what in the world is this guy all about? And it's the mystery. The mystery starts out. We are already involved in a mystery. Like who is Spawn? What happened in his life? Why is he like this? Why has he got demons doing these things? What are his powers? So pretty neat stuff. Pick a panel, man.
I think I'm going to go with one of these, I guess, dream sequence type things where you see just the disembodied, like, crescent eye.
Oh, yeah.
Over his funeral. Mm-hmm. And there's all these spider webs, which I don't know why there are spider webs other than McFarlane is like, hey, I'm good at drawing spider webs. I did it for years. So there's spider webs all over these panels and stuff. But I really like that image of just the stark image of just the eye piece with the webs, kind of floating disembodied over his funeral panel.
How about this? He's trying to clear the cobwebs of his mind.
Okay, sure.
All right. Well, hey, I will take the dude getting launched out of the building. Spawn hits him. I mean, he just grabs him by the collar, throat, and throws him out of a window. And he's that is a cool, like, he's got his back arched. He's being thrown out. This glass is going everywhere. I guess that's our second glass window breaking panel. I didn't realize I was doing that, but until right now. So, but yeah, that looks. It's probably about the most action you get out of this book, but it's done really well. So there you go.
The last thing, there is a illustration by George Perez in the back. Yeah, it's a Spawn image. And it's probably the best image in the book, even though McFarlane is great. We just lost Perez about, I guess, 3 weeks ago at this point, as of the recording. And, we've done several episodes where we talked about Perez. He's awesome. And sucks that he's gone. This is a great image of him, doing Todd a solid and throwing a Spawn pin up in the back of this issue.
Love it. Yeah. Rest in peace. Wow.
Thanks for joining us. Unspoken Issues is part of the UnspokenDecade.com, the home for 90s comics, blogs, and podcasts. Unspoken Issues also has a Facebook group you can join if you are interested. Just search the Unspoken Issues podcast and request to join. All of this would not be possible without W2Mnet.com and the Rattleitch Broadcasting Network, so make sure to seek them out for more podcasts. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please feel free to share, and we look forward to entertaining you again soon.